Don McCown is joining us from the Piedmont Environmental Council. He joined PEC in January 2022, just in time for all the excitement with wilderness crossing, and he handles the land use issues in Madison and Orange counties. Prior to that, he served for over 20 years in a variety of community service roles, including supervisor in Virginia's judicial system and AmeriCorps program director for Habitat for Humanity in North Carolina. Hailing from West Texas, Don has loved exploring rural Loudoun, Clark, and Albemarle counties, where he and his family have lived for 15 years. He received his BA in sociology from the University of Oklahoma and his law degree from the Catholic University of America. He's here today to talk to us about the Wilderness Crossing project and help us prepare for the public hearing that's going to be held on March 23rd. So welcome, Don.
Thank you. Do you advance the slides for me, or do I click? Okay, so thanks everybody for being here, and thanks to Jen for the invitation. I tell people jokingly now, like, I could talk about wilderness crossing all day, every day, because it's kind of my full-time job.
Talking big.
Oh, sure. Sure.
So yeah.
So that's okay. Thanks for saying. So at any rate, I will. I think that most people in this group know what wilderness crossing is. I wasn't sure if I needed to sort of start way back at the beginning, but does kind of show of hands, everybody know what I'm talking about when I say wilderness crossing? Okay, people have been fairly, most of you seem to be pretty well informed then. I want to kind of give you a little bit about where we are. We're in the process where it's an application for rezoning is basically technically what this is. And I want to tell you a little bit about where we are in the process, and then share with you some of PEC's concerns. Again, I don't presume that everybody in this room or everybody in the county is opposed to wilderness crossing or every aspect of it, but PEC's done a deep dive in this. We've been looking very deeply into it for 18 months. And so we have some concerns that, I do want to share with you all. And then I kind of wanted to wrap up with, if you do have concerns and you want to weigh in, kind of give you some tips and some sort of next steps. That is what I hope to do. And yeah, if you could go ahead and do the next slide. That's the rapid end, by the way, that first picture. So again, I kind of move around too. I hope I'm not off screen, but if you've been paying attention at all to wilderness crossing, you've probably seen this image. And so I won't spend a whole lot of time, but just to kind of put this all in context, you see where Lake of the Woods is, you see where wilderness crossing is. That red outline, that's the property. Okay, it's all owned by one family. It's about 2,600 acres. And a couple things to point out. You see Route 3 there in purple, so you're getting oriented. That if you can make out where the Sheets is there, kind of where 20 and 3 come together, across the road there, kind of where that sort of to the left of where it says Orange County. That wooded parcel there, right in there, that was where the site of Walmart was going to go in. If you've been in the county for a long time, or if you remember that. So that was, that was a fight back in like 2011, 2012. Again, same property owner, some of the same issues. But that was, as you know, that worked out. Walmart got moved off of, farther down the road, away from the battlefield, the park area. That's now owned by the state. It's an historic conservation easement. So that wooded parcel, I just like to point out, that was, a victory there, and that's protected. A couple other things just to point out on the map, and then we'll talk more about them. But you see the red line there that says proposed Route 20 realignment. That right there where the cursor is. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I just like to point it out. So that is not currently part of the wilderness crossing application or proffer. Okay, and the proffer is a set of promises that the applicant makes, says, if you'll rezone this, then I'll do this, this, and this. Okay, so I want to be fair and clear, there's nothing right now on the table about the realignment of Route 20. However, the reason we, are still kind of raising the alarm about this is that red line, that strip there is owned by the same family that is wants to develop Wilderness Crossing. It is on both sides. Yes, yeah, it's the King family. Both sides of Route 20, both sides of that red line, that proposed Route 20 are national park. That's the protected battlefield. So it's a strip of land that's owned by the family that runs right through protected battlefield. They own it. It's, individual parcels there. And it would tee up with the main entrance to Wilderness Crossing. Their design includes that the new Route 20 would spill right into the main entrance of the development. So again, even though it's not currently like on the table, the Board of Supervisors are not making any decision about that, coming up, it's relevant to us because it's just, to us, it's part and parcel of the same project. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to point that out on the map so you're aware.
Is the Pilgrim Church?
I think you can't make it out very well in this, but I think that little notch, that little, right? Yeah, Jen, down. Maybe. It's somewhere in there. I on that picture, I can't exactly tell. It's, it's wooded right there. But anyway, that puts us, kind of gives us the context of what we're talking about. And you can go ahead and. So what's the problem? And again, to be fair, again, I don't presume that everybody shares our concerns, that everybody doesn't want this project, but I'm kind of here to share what we found and, PEC's concerns. And I'm happy to talk, stay around afterwards if people, have more in-depth questions. But our overarching concern with this project is it's huge. It would be the biggest land use decision, in Orange County history. And we just don't know exactly what is being proposed. There are just too many missing details in the application materials and the proffer statement for you and I to be able to, be informed, to weigh in. Frankly, for the planning commissioners and the supervisors to make an informed decision. There's still just too many details that are just not settled. What could be, exactly even what could be developed here, as well as, one of the main concerns is mercury contamination. We still don't have the details about how completely that would be cleaned up, or if and when that would be completely cleaned up. So overarching concern, it's just, we just don't know enough. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So top concerns. There are others. Your personal concern might not be on my list, but these are just kind of our top priority concerns. Part of the interesting thing about this project, maybe different than from some other land use projects that we work on, because of just the scale of this one, not that there's anything necessarily inherently wrong with, a big project, but this one is so big and so complicated. There's just a long list of potential, issues and problems. And that's just made this one kind of particularly complex. But I'm going to go through and touch on each of these just a little bit. And kind of give you an update and sort of zero in on kind of what we're concerned about. Okay, Jen. Okay, so this is a copy of, or an image of, the current proffer statement. Again, I won't go into, land use law 101, but a proffer statement goes along with a rezoning. It's what an applicant says: I promise I will do these things if you will rezone this property. And a proffer statement is voluntary. That's important to know. The county can't make an applicant do these things. This is voluntary, and it's supposed to be kind of directly correlate to the impacts that this project would cause. It's supposed to be a way to mitigate, the possible impacts from the project. So of interest to us right now is just this pair. This is what the proffer statement right now says about the mines. And wanted to point out, so that first highlighted line, applicant agrees to, I'm sorry, I thought that would be
Assess the project.
Assess is the word. Yeah. Okay. Go to the next. Go to the next.
Stand
You
forward.
can stand up here on,
Well, I didn't know if I wanted it needed to be in front of that.
Turn the.
I could be off camera maybe.
you're off camera.
Okay, is that okay? That'd be easier. That's fine. Oh, thank you.
Turn this a little bit
All right, so then next slide.
so that you get the speaker right there.
All right, so here's our concern there. The applicant is saying we'll assess the project site, okay, so, SELC, that's Southern Environmental Law Center, they've partnered with us on this project, they're monitoring it. They are experts in kind of this, working with sort of toxic sites and some of those, working with state agencies, so I'm so thrilled that they're working with us. This is what we hope for, that the assessment and the remediation plan needs to cover the whole property. Again, I won't go into the history of that property, but extensive gold mining operations that happened, in the 1840s, as long ago as 1840s. So we don't really know what's exactly on the property. There are some identified, named, mines that we can identify and have been identified. But our position is that the nature of those operations, and they happened so long ago, and we don't really know what's on the property. So to propose building a park or a school or residential neighborhood really anywhere on that property without a complete, thorough assessment of the whole thing just doesn't make sense to us, right? And so right now, the proffer just says, we'll assess the project site, okay? And so the projects, that's the only time that phrase is used in the proffer, it's not defined. So we're just pushing for, we would like to see them commit to assessing the whole property, just let's, right, we just want to know what's there, right? Fair enough, we want to know what's there. Okay, Jen. Oops, back, no, back. Okay, now forward. Yeah.
Well, how do you explain to people what are the threats from these old gold mines?
Sure, and just in the interest of,
Sulfur.
yeah, right,
Mercury.
yeah. Bill, thank you. It's a great question. And I do, in the interest of time, I could, again, talk all day about gold mines too, but in real general, top level kind of concerns, the way they process the gold historically is they use mercury as well as other chemicals, but primarily mercury. And, the EPA wasn't around back then. So it's like when they were done with it, it's just tossed off, so that's the main concern. And mercury doesn't go away, it doesn't evaporate, it's there, it seeps into the ground, it gets into the water. Some of the operations we know, the sort of tailings pile, if you will, where the used mercury would have gone, it's actually sitting in the middle of a stream that flows into Wilderness Run, which is the boundary between Spotsylvania and Orange. And then Wilderness Run, just downstream from that, flows into the Rapidan. The Rapidan, the stretch, if you remember that map along, this property has like 2 miles of the Rapidan. That portion of it is impaired, classified by the EPA and DEQ as impaired because of mercury in fish tissue. So we feel like we've got enough, we feel like we can connect the dots, that there was mercury on this site, it was left on site, it's making its way through the water, into the river. So, yeah.
Question real quick.
Sure.
So as part of the purchase, is there no requirement that they do an environmental phase 1 and that triggers a phase 2?
Yeah, great question. There is, as it sits right now, just a landowner is not obligated. Again, this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. But right now, there's no regulatory scheme that is going to come in and require something of the landowner at this stage. We've been told in no uncertain terms by DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, the only way that they would get involved in this project is through what you see there. It's called the Voluntary Remediation Program. So it's voluntary, but they work with landowners to make sure that a site like this is assessed and cleaned up properly and give them resources. Now, there's no funding, but they give them technical assistance to help them do the work. And then at the end of the process, DEQ will come in and sort of do an evaluation. And if they deem it to have been done well or correctly, completely, then they'll certify that as remediating.
And that's in place.
No, that's what we have, the planning commissioners and other organizations, we have pushed this issue for 18 months, and we have gotten the applicant, we feel like, to at least commit to that. They have at least named the voluntary remediation program in their proper statement. However, and that's the next slide, all they're saying right now is we'll commence the VRP prior to filing the site plan. And to your question, as a part of just any construction projects, there has to be a site plan filed, and there are permitting things that would kick in at some point. So DEQ could become involved just in their normal course of business, like they do sediment, water runoff, stormwater runoff. So there would be some kind of involvement, but they've made it clear to the planning commission and those of us who are listening that we really wouldn't get involved with the remediation of these mines, but for this VRP project. Okay. And again, that I could spend hours talking about that, and I'm happy to answer questions maybe at the end about the specifics of that. But what I want to point out, because we've got, again, that's the problem. There's a long list of issues. The problem with this aspect of it is, again, there's no language in this proffer that indicates that they will complete this process. Okay. And again, what's important is that the whole property is assessed. We want to know what's there. And we want some assurance that once you go in there and you start this remediation process, that it's going to be completed. Just to say you're going to commence it, that's lacking. So quick one, yeah.
If this is approved,
Mhm.
we lose, it's approved, and they commence, and then they say, we don't like it, we're just gonna stop it. Who has the legal authority then to file a motion to put their feet to the fire at that stage?
Through the voluntary remediation program or through DEQ, my understanding is no one. It's voluntary. It's private property. It's a landowner. It's voluntary.
So if the horse gets out of the barn, we can't close the doors.
Now, I can't speak to. I don't know what if there are federal regulations that would kick in. That's what SELC is kind of looking into. They're not taking any action or anything yet, but they're exploring, just the possibilities there. But in terms of state regulatory schemes, it seems like the answer's nothing. Yeah.
It looks like they're saying they're not even gonna find out if there's a problem until after the zoning is approved. Wouldn't it
Well-
be better to find out? And isn't that the reason you would
Yeah.
want to know whether the zoning is approved or not?
Yes, that's another problem. The challenge, again, the nature of this program, since it's voluntary, there's no incentive for a landowner, and I'm not picking on this applicant or anything. There would be no incentive for a landowner to. It's expensive. Again, there's no funding associated with the DEQ doesn't pay for this. It's out. It would be personal funds that would pay for this. So there's no incentive. This would be an enormous expense. I don't have any idea what it would cost to do the assessment and then cleaning up something like this, which this was mentioned at least at one time as a possible Superfund site. Nothing ever came to that. Again, I want to be fair. That was just kind of a comment that an inspector made, but it's at least raised that, alarm, and somebody who knows something more than I do, or at least raised that possibility in their mind. So this would be an enormous project to clean up. There's no funding. So that's the answer to the question. Well, I'm not gonna go out on a limb and do this cleanup and pay for all this if you're not going to guarantee that I can't then develop this
Well,
property.
but why can't they just find out if there is a problem
That's
and then just do the cleanup?
well, that's a question for the applicant. I mean, again, would you want to it's sort of like I'm about to buy a house. I'll pay for all this work to be done, not knowing if I'm going to get if I'm going to actually get to the contract. Or something.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
there's just no incentive.
But-
Yeah, a couple
I
quick
just make
questions.
a suggestion that we hold the questions till the end.
That's
And then that way.
Yeah, I'm
maybe
happy to
some of the
hang out
questions we
after the meeting,
answered.
because I know this raises a ton. Again, that's part of the challenge here. So there's just so many issues, but yes, thank you. I will hang out. So moving on to another kind of top level concern, water supply. So the applicant in their proffer statement, they have set aside some land for reservoirs. If you've lived in the county for a long time, you may have heard this talk about, we need new reservoirs up in eastern end of the county. Well, when the county back in 2007 or so did some studies, there were some sites that were identified as probably good sites for reservoirs. They are on this property, happen to be on this property. So the applicant has agreed in the proffers to, we'll set aside that property and we'll dedicate it, meaning we'll give it to the county when the time comes. That's still not clear in the proffer exactly how and when that would happen. But anyway, they have said, okay, we recognize there's a need for reservoirs. They're on our property. We'll set that aside. However, the problem in our from our perspective is that the county has taken 0 steps to ensure that there is an adequate water supply. And basically, and you may all know this, if you're on a well, you're on groundwater and you're fine, but anywhere else in the county, in the town of Orange and Gordonsville, anywhere else in the county, if you're not on a well, your water comes from the Rapidan. And if you lived here in 2002, you know that the Rapidan practically went dry. Water restrictions kicked in. Well, nothing has changed. There's no additional water in the Rapidan since then. And the county hasn't done anything despite knowing since at least 2007, according to their consultant studies that they, commissioned, they've known that, hey, county, there's a potential water shortage on your horizon. With increased growth in that part of the county and with increased likelihood of drought that's predicted, you are facing a possible another water shortage. So the county has known that since 2007, but to our knowledge, and as far as we can tell, they've done really nothing to address that.
And it's not the county, it's the Rapidan Service Authority, right?
Well, the Rapidan Service Authority is the water authority. Now, 2 of our county supervisors serve on that board, and we're involved in, back as far back as some of these studies. So it's a combination. I mean, the Rapidan Service Authority just is, they don't make the decisions. It's like county governments, tell the Rapidan Service Authority what they need, and the Rapidan Service Authority kind of tries to do what they can to provide the capacity. So I really do put this on Orange County for not taking. Yeah.
The only water impoundment that got added after that drought period in 2003 to 2 to 5 is a raw water storage basin that the USDA funded.
Mhm.
So Orange County has put.
And I know Roy Jacobson's on the call. He's the kind of subject matter expert on this particular issue. If any of you know Roy, he'd probably be happy to answer questions too, but if you could go next slide. But I owe a lot of this information to Roy's research. So here's what we've just learned just recently. So the RSA you mentioned, and when I say RSA, that's the Rapidan Service Authority. So at one of the recent work sessions in February, I guess, their representative told the planning commission that in a severe drought, again, we would be in the same situation we were in 2002. So again, nothing has changed since then. And the county will just physically not be able to withdraw enough water because it won't be there in the river to withdraw. So RSA has kind of said, oh, well, we can definitely supply this project. We can make this project, we have the capacity to serve this project. Part of the problem is when they're talking about that, they're talking about, we can provide the infrastructure and we can make sure that all that's in place, but they can't guarantee that there's water in the river, right? And so that's a big difference in our, and so they said that much. Well, yeah, no, if we have another drought like we did in 2002, we'd have to go under the restrictions again.
Not without any ability.
Without any, that's right. That's exactly that's current situation that we're in right now, the conditions. So these proposed reservoirs. So that there was some discussion about that at the planning commission meeting. Just so you know, it would be great. We need these reservoirs probably, but they would only supply they're only a 52-day supply, even if both were built and functional and operational and full. So that's not, again, in a severe drought situation, that's not necessarily going to solve, every problem. Not to mention that 7 to 10 years is kind of an optimistic estimate of how long it would even take to get a reservoir online. So if we decided today, yes, let's start that process. All the agencies involved, all the permitting, not to mention the construction and the, just the development of it. We're talking 7 to 10 years before that would even be.
Who's responsible for that build out? Is that the applicant?
For the reservoir? No, the applicant doesn't have any, they've just agreed that, hey, these preferred sites are on our property and we're willing to sort of set that land aside for the county in the event that the county wants to do that. So that's the relationship kind of between the applicant. So concern, there's probably not adequate planning in place right now for our conditions currently. When you factor in, maybe 4,000 new houses and 5 million square feet of industrial uses, plus maybe increased likelihood of drought. It just, we feel like there's a problem. We're just concerned that there's not enough water.
How big is this site?
The property,
Total site?
it's like 2,600 acres for the whole property. Yeah.
Is this 115 acres of data centers?
Well, no, I'm gonna get to that. Yeah, hold that thought. So moving on to the next kind of top level concern for us is the impact to the national park and the historic battlefield there. I already mentioned the realignment of Route 20. That's what I was talking about. That little red line. Again, to be fair, that is not scheduled. It's not part of this application. They're not proffering anything about that. But in our view, we can't separate that concept from this proposal because the ownership and the history of it, when VDOT appeared at the Planning Commission and was questioned about this, one of the statements they made is, yeah, well, that realignment, it might be a solution to some of the traffic congestion that we see sometimes at that intersection of 20 and 3. But one, it's hugely expensive. And so, it's always a funding issue. And two, that's really been promoted by the developer was VDOT's statement and the county. So to be clear, we took that to mean, so this is not a huge priority for VDOT. Again, it's in the long range maybe plan, or it's been identified as, yeah, maybe that'd be a good solution. But to be clear, the applicant has been promoting this idea for a long time. And so that's why we keep bringing it up, that it's still a possibility. It's still very concerning. And again, I think I already mentioned it would basically cut through what is right now protected battlefield and send you right to the front entrance of Wilderness. Related to this, more traffic. I've heard from a lot of people who live in Lake of the Woods, they're worried about traffic. Again, we could go into that for hours. I just don't, I don't even have time to get into the changes that this project would bring to Route 3 through that area, through Lake of the Woods and the Food Lion Shopping Center. There's a lot of proposed changes that this would impact, and I know that's a real concern to people, but in the interest of time today, just know that there would be some impacts. There'd be some changes. As a part of a project like this, an applicant does has to commission a traffic, it's called just a traffic study or a traffic impact analysis. So they did one, and it's extensive. It's like 800 pages or something long. It's extensive, but it really doesn't consider impacts to the national park. And when I talked to the National Park Service, and if any of you were at our town hall in October, we had folks from the park kind of come and address this. But the concerns are, if you don't even consider the realignment of Route 20, it's just the more traffic that's in that area, the nature of it is people are going to cut through park roads. If you know that Hill Ewell Drive and Orange Plank Road, there are ways to kind of do a shortcut. If you're coming from Fredericksburg, if you're going, farther down 20, kind of cut through and, so they're concerned that, with, as many as 11,000 new cars on the road during peak hours, and that's the applicant's numbers. That's from their traffic study, plus just thousands of more during the rest of the day. And again, this is at build out. To be fair, this is a 40-year, project. So this is not going to happen tomorrow if this were to be approved or something. But again, we're trying to take the long view here. The concern is that just with all those extra cars on the road, that will definitely impact the experience at a national park. I mean, you've all been to the national park, even if you haven't been to the one here in our own neighborhood. And part of it is kind of you're going to some place that's separate and, quiet, away from sort of, you're wanting to enter a special space. That would be impacted. There's no doubt that just that many more cars in that immediate area would impact kind of, your experience on the national park. And again, I just like to point out for people, Orange County is so lucky, even if you don't have any interest in the battlefield or military history or Civil War stuff, it's this great open space, miles of trails. It's a national park in our community. County doesn't have to pay for it or maintain it, go jog there, take a walk, go birding, whatever. It's a national park, we call it shorthand Wilderness Battlefield, but it's part of it's a unit of the national park. And so I just feel like we're lucky to have it, and we should really, we should protect it. But anyway, next slide. And I hope I'm not going too fast, but I want to be mindful of the time.
Okay.
How much time do I have?
We're already into question.
Okay,
period.
what if we do, if there, why
I
don't
think
we-
the data centers are,
okay, well, I was gonna say, if the sort of how to weigh in, if that part is more important, we can kind of skip ahead to that.
well,
Well, let me just mention that I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, but just be aware when we say our concern is industrialization. So the proffer statement says we will cap our industrial development at 5 million square feet. It's about 732 acres. And what they are proposing is data centers, which I'll talk to you again afterwards if you want to know more about what a data center is, or a warehouse distribution center, which is, the Amazon or Walmart kind of, truck kind of distribution center. So they are proposing one of those two uses. They won't tell us who it is. They've already talked to potential buyers. They won't tell us because there's non-disclosure agreements that county officials have signed. So we don't know who they're talking to, which would make a big difference, because a data center compared to a warehouse or distribution center, those are very different uses and would have very different impacts. And we feel like, hey, we would like to know what we're dealing with here. How can the county make a decision on this if you don't even know which type of use it is? Because they're very different uses. So click ahead a few. There's a data center, beautiful data center in Northern Virginia. We can skip that one. Skip that one. Skip that one. Skip that one. Again, I'm happy to talk about this stuff afterwards, but I don't want to take up the whole time. Go ahead and skip ahead. All right, so next steps. Planning Commission public hearing is March 23rd at the Public Safety Building, out at the airport. It will be streamed like it always is, meaning you can be at home and watch it online, but you cannot comment. There's not a way to make comments or submit comments online during the meeting. It's just for viewing only. So if you have concerns or questions for the Planning Commission and you want to weigh in, you can do several things. You can speak at the hearing, and typically, and I don't expect it to change for this meeting, but stay tuned, I guess. Typically, you just sign up that night. Once you show up for the meeting, there will be a sign-up sheet and you sign your name that you want to speak. I don't think they'll require a sign up in advance, but I don't know if they anticipate a huge turnout. They could do that, but I don't anticipate that. You can submit written comments by email or by letter starting now. I mean, it doesn't have to wait for any time period. You can do that now. And you can call your supervisor or your planning commissioner. Their phone numbers are on the website. Give them a call. If you do plan to speak, I wanted to mention, unlike me, don't run over your time. It'll probably be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. And I can tell you from experience, if people get up there and they just kind of go on and on and on, that makes other people who want to speak leave because they get annoyed or they don't have all night or whatever. So we don't get to hear as many people speak, which it's not hearing 10 minutes from one person. It's more like, let's hear a couple minutes from 20 people is more of an impact. So just, please bear that in mind. I know, people have a lot to say and that's fine, but just, people.
So time ourselves. Before we
Yes,
speak.
that would be,
And
yes.
make sure we stay in.
Yes, yeah, it's helpful to know, well, first of all, just if you are going to speak, write it out ahead of time, practice it and time it. And again, the planning commissioners, they've got a long night, they've got a lot of people to hear from, they're going to tune out, after, 2 minutes is about the limit of their attention span. So if you can't say it in 2 to 3 minutes, then you're probably going to lose.
When I was chairman of the planning commission,
Oh, perfect.
we had one with about 200-300 people there,
Oh, wow, yeah,
and 60 or 70 signed up to speak.
Yeah.
So I put a limit on 2 minutes
Okay.
for talk.
okay,
And they pitched up a moment about 2 minutes. I can't say anything.
Yeah.
And then when we got to the end of it, I opened it up and said, is anybody can say anything that has not been already said? And that shut it down.
right, no, right. But yes, good tips. Practice it before, write it out before, just again, and I'm not trying to limit anybody's, time at the podium or whatever, but in the interest of letting everyone who wants to speak, it's more effective that way, is my perspective. next slide. If we have a couple of minutes, you can go to the next slide. So I owe this comes from a group, Loudon Wildlife Conservancy. They put on this. I don't know if you want to take a picture of that, or I can again cover it afterwards, but they have some great tips on, presenting your comment. I won't walk through each one. I can talk to you about it afterwards. And then Jen, if you go to the next slide, next one, one more. Yeah. And so same really concept applies if you're writing a letter or an email. There's some great tips here. And just to kind of summarize, whether it's spoken comments or letter or an email, one thing that everybody recommends is kind of personalize it. Like, I live in Lake of the Woods and I love taking my dog for a walk on the battlefield every morning or whatever. Or, when I was a kid, I used to canoe the Rapidan and, fish, make it personal, it's easy. And PEC will probably at some point, we haven't done it yet, but in the next couple of weeks, we may have one of those just click and send an email to your supervisor thing, because we do want kind of just numbers. But if you have the time and the inclination, I would urge you to send a more personal note, because I've been told by Mark Johnson, the chair of the board, and I've been told by Brian Nickel on the planning commissioner, that those boilerplate click and send things, they hate them. Now, again, right or wrong, I'm just reporting what, that they don't listen, they don't read. Now, it does register if they get 100 of those, they've registered, wow, I've gotten 100 emails on this. So the tally counts. But again, if you're really engaged and interested, my request is take the extra few minutes and maybe just type, it doesn't have to be long, but make a little bit more of a personal message. Okay, sorry for going over, but I will stay around, and if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Just a comment or so.
Sure.
Material you could use. When I remember when Lake in the Woods first got started, and they drilled 52 wells. There was not enough water in the 52 wells to supply anything. They averaged somewhere between 1 and 2 gallons per minute.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody comes up with the idea we can drill wells, that ain't gonna work.
That's
already been put on the back burner.
That's right.
And what we did at one point, because of development out there, we thought that we would go and have a public hearing at Lake of the Woods for the Lake of the Woods people, for input of what they wanted to see for the development of this.
Mhm.
So we went out there and had it at the clubhouse at the public hearing there. And we asked for input from Lake of the Woods. What did they want to see 10 and 20 years from now? And they all kind of said, well, I don't know. And so they finally looked at me, I was chairman, and said, well, do you have any ideas? Well, we did. We came with something in my pocket. And what was in my pocket was, at that time, make Route 3 downtown Lake of the Woods, and put in a bypass, limited access bypass crossing Wilderness Road between there and the Rapidan River, coming out somewhere around Germanna. Now, if this goes in and they want to do anything like that, forget it. Maybe you've developed to the point now where I'm not sure. But if this goes in, there's no way you can go through this and make a limited access to it, and just make Route 3 Main Street of Lake of the Woods.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know, just again, and I'll
They thought it was a great idea.
yeah, Route 3 is part of, VDOT does have a long range plan for Route 3 to be kind of just what do they call it? It's an arterial road. They want to limit the number of stoplights and make it kind of a fast cut through from 95 to 29. So there are big plans for Route 3, but
Yeah, just real quick, Canton National Park next, the Route 20 realignment.
they don't own that land. That land is owned by the King family, so they can do with it.
But it's probably limited in how wide it can.
Well, I mean, it's the size of.
It's gonna be a
parcel.
2-lane.
I don't know how many acres it is, but yeah.
Would they be able to develop there more of a commercial? type of-
I think they have to get it rezoned. I think it's probably zoned.
That's not
agricultural.
part of this.
It's not part of this. Okay, thank you, Jen. Sorry, that was fast, but I'll hang out.